Hello, in this video we'll take a look at the Blazorise and specifically the Blazorise tables, features that they offer and all the rest, and also the setup of a Blazorise. On this channel we heavily cover the MudBlazor library, which is completely free. On the other hand, the Blazorise library, it is licensed and you do have to pay for licenses. You can review that at their own site. We won't get into that too much, but the setup is slightly different. The setup is somewhat complicated, but they do have very easy to follow guides and very easy to set up. So let's get started with that. We'll just later look at the table. But in general, what you have to do first, you have to go to the NuGet packages as you usually do. They follow essentially the Bootstrap, and then for fonts and different other such things, they use FontAwesome for the icons and stuff. So you have FontAwesome and Bootstrap 5, Blazorise.bootstrap 5, and Blazorise.icons.FontAwesome. So those are the two libraries you do need to install. And again, this is a different approach from MudBlazor. We do sort of put existing arrangements into the Blazor arrangement, and it is licensed. So again, whichever library you choose is your own arrangement, but then you want to register the services. So you go to the builder, services, add Blazorise, use options. You want to have that immediate text input, which is an interesting option. You can either use false or true on this one. If you want to have changes reflected on actual binding right away or not, can be perhaps useful for some projects, probably not for most of them. And then you just add the Bootstrap 5 providers and FontAwesome. So whatever we installed, essentially, we add in addition to the Blazorise options. You can just copy and paste this, and this is available on their own site, so nothing to worry about there. The next thing, we can go to the App.razor. In this case, in the older versions, it might be host.cshtml, and that's a kind of an old thing at this point, so you probably want to go to this sort of an arrangement at this point, something a bit newer. But you add the Bootstrap, you add the FontAwesome, just like you would do in any sort of custom application. And of course, that way, if you are more familiar with that, perhaps this library would allow you to customize things a bit more easily than something like MudBlazor. You also add the JavaScript as well, but this is just for Bootstrap. Essentially, it is just a wrapper and a few additional things, few very important things in terms of the actual logic on how these components are handled. And the final thing here, we just add the imports. So now we can add, we can use Blazorise. Actual table setup, we have just a simple table, but you'll see how you can quite easily actually customize to group things into certain arrangements inside a table. This is just school supplies inventory example, sort of a real world example where we're just using a markup data and nothing too exciting there. We also have a little text input, which you'll see it's exactly just Bootstrap basics of text input. Probably doesn't cut it these days. Perhaps you might want to go and use some more additional themes and whatnot to make it look a bit more beautiful and exciting. But to create a table, you simply use a table, uppercase T on the table, so then it becomes Blazorise.table. Make sure you do use that if you're using Blazor, because otherwise you just use it normal table, which doesn't really work all that well. We can add a few options. In this case, we're adding stripes. So stripe, one row is sort of more highlighted, the next one isn't, and the next is, and the next one isn't. And hoverable, you essentially hover on a row, and it's got some hovering effect. basic sort of real good table features. What they look like is up to you to decide. Again, it's not perhaps on by default as fancy looking as MudBlazor, but it certainly does work. And again, as far as overriding goes, perhaps this might be a bit easier. Perhaps in some ways it might actually be more difficult. This video is not about that, but this is how you add those options. You don't even add true false, you just add those options directly, which is a nice use of Blazor features in general. And then we add another few options, header, table height and whatnot, and resizes, so that all works quite well. The actual structure of the table, this is the most important part. You use it in basically more or less the same way as you would use, not exactly perhaps, but in a very similar way for sure, as you would use a general sort of simple regular HTML table. So you have your table header, your THs, your table header rows, TRs, like that, and header cells like this. So although it's a full word, not an acronym like you have in the regular HTML, it is perhaps a more familiar arrangement here. And you can add some options as well on these cells. Not too much perhaps on the headers, but still. Now, the way we do groups, you can do this table row group, but we should probably take a look at the actual data. The actual data, there's a lot of code predefined here, but obviously this is just a predefined list of school supplies. Any data would apply in that sort of the same way. The filters we'll take a look at a bit later, but we have grouped supplies, that's what we're going to use, and then we just group by category. Very simple arrangement. So once they are grouped, we can go back here and look at the actual thing. We have grouped supplies, so essentially this is just a simple IEnumerable, in this case I grouping arrangement, and you could obviously display this in any way you want, because this is just a for each loop. So whatever you provide as far as key goes, it could be the value as whatever you want. So we just have a table row, and each table row, and it could be just a simple list. You don't have to do a group. You could just loop table rows instead of table groups, and you have your for each inside that. And then the most important thing is you generate your row header. And then you generate your row cell. And that's it. The header is the ID essentially for the group in a table row, in a table row group. If you don't have table groups, you don't necessarily need the ID, but you need the table row still. But that's how the arrangement works. So again, this is, as far as tables go, they are quite customizable, and you do have your footer. So if you need to put any action buttons on the footers, and obviously just as any kind of Blazor arrangement, you can generate your buttons, provide your data into clickable actions with the buttons. That's perfectly fine as well. But also you can have your table footer, just again as the normal table. That's the principle that they do follow. And with that said, we will conclude this video.